9 nannies had fled in 1 week from the mansion of a millionaire, tormented by the incessant crying of his triplets. No doctor, specialist or therapist had been able to explain the mystery that turned the nights into a living hell. Until a simple house cleaner, moved by a pain she recognized in those children, decided to act. What she discovered that dawn forever changed the destiny of the millionaire. The babies, and hers too. The light from the corridor of the Mendel mansion reflected on the Italian marble floor as Raphael paced in circles, holding his cell phone to his ear. His face, normally composed for investor meetings and business magazine interviews, now displayed deep dark circles under his eyes and a 3-day stubble. "What do you mean you don't have anyone else available? I'll pay double, triple if necessary." The businessman's voice echoed through the corridors of the 1,500 square meter mansion on the Upper East Side, one of New York City's most exclusive neighborhoods. On the other end of the line, the owner of the city's most prestigious luxury nanny agency tried to explain for the 10th time. "Mr. Mendel, please understand my situation. 9 professionals in 1 week, 9. The last one left 2 hours ago in tears, saying she'd rather go back to Switzerland and care for quintuplets than spend another night in your house." Raphael ran a hand through his dark hair, a gesture that had become his nervous tic since he alone took on the responsibility of raising the triplets. At 32, he commanded Mendel Tech, a billion-dollar company that had revolutionized the digital security sector in the United States. He was capable of resolving corporate crises with a simple phone call, closing international deals without leaving his office, but he found himself completely defeated by 3 small 10-month-old babies. "Please, Teresa, there must be someone, anyone who—" He was interrupted by the beginning of a terrifying symphony he already knew by heart. First came Marina's high-pitched cry, followed by Matthew's deep wail, and finally Michael's broken sobs. As if rehearsed, the 3 babies began to cry exactly at 10 p.m. as they had every night for months. "Are you hearing this? That's why I need help." Raphael almost shouted into the phone, his eyes turning to the wall clock that marked the beginning of another 6 hours of torment. Teresa sighed on the other end of the line. "Mr. Mendel, I'm very sorry, but I do not have any professionals available at the moment who will accept the job. I will continue looking and will contact you as soon as I have someone." The call ended, leaving Raphael immersed in the deafening chorus of the 3 babies. He climbed the stairs like a soldier marching into a battle he knew he couldn't win. In the room decorated in the softest shades of blue and pink, 3 cribs occupied the center, arranged in a triangular shape, following the recommendation of a sleep specialist who had visited the house 3 weeks prior. Marina, with her sparse dark hair, identical to her mother's, was always the first to begin the nightly ritual. Matthew, the heaviest of the 3, had a red face from screaming so much, while Michael, the smallest and most fragile, sobbed with an intensity that seemed impossible for his tiny body. Raphael picked Marina up, trying to rock her with movements he had rehearsed hundreds of times. "Calm down, my love, Daddy's here," he murmured, even knowing his words would have no effect. He had tried everything: changing diapers, offering bottles, rocking, singing, playing classical music, white noise, colorful mobiles, massages, colic creams. Nothing worked. Absolutely nothing. The previous nanny, a 50-year-old German woman with 3 degrees in child development and almost 2 decades of international experience, had lasted 2 full days. On the 3rd night, she entered Raphael's office at 5 in the morning, suitcase packed and eyes red with exhaustion. "Herr Mendel," she said in her heavily accented English, "in 20 years of caring for children, I have never seen anything like it. It is not normal. The children, they are suffering from something I cannot identify." Raphael tried to offer a raise, extra vacation, free weekends, but the woman just shook her head, determined, not for all the money in the world. "There is something in this house, something that is not right. I am very sorry." Now with Marina in his arms, while the other 2 continued their concert of laments, Raphael felt that same sense of helplessness that had pursued him since the day Beatrice passed away during childbirth. The doctors had warned about the risks. Her congenital heart condition made the pregnancy high risk. When they discovered the triplets, the doctor was emphatic. It was necessary to terminate the pregnancy to preserve her life. Beatrice, however, refused. I will not give up our children, Raphael. I cannot. And he, madly in love, did not have the strength to contradict her, to insist on what the doctors recommended. He agreed, promised that everything would be fine, that they would find the best specialists, that medicine was advanced. Empty promises that ended in an operating room with 3 premature babies surviving, and his wife not. "Sir?" The soft voice cut through his thoughts. Raphael turned, still holding Marina, to find Caroline Summers standing in the doorway of the room. She wore the grey uniform of the cleaning staff, her curly hair tied in a simple bun, and carried a bucket of cleaning products. "Excuse me. I didn't mean to interrupt," she said, keeping her eyes down as she always did. "I just thought I'd ask if I should come back later to clean this corridor." Raphael knew little about Caroline Summers beyond what the cleaning company manager had informed him. 26 years old, had worked the night shift for 6 months, was responsible and discreet. He saw her occasionally, always in glimpses, as she moved silently through the mansion's corridors between 8 p.m. and 6 a.m., cleaning every space with meticulous dedication. "No, you can continue your work," Raphael replied, trying to make his voice heard over the baby's crying. "Just excuse the noise, they're like this every night." Caroline nodded but did not move. Her eyes were now fixed on the cribs, with an expression Raphael couldn't decipher. It wasn't the usual mix of irritation and pity he saw on the faces of staff, doctors and nannies. It was something different, deeper. "Have you tried the heart method?" she asked suddenly, and then immediately brought her hand to her mouth as if she had committed a terrible indiscretion. "Heart method?" Raphael repeated, confused. "I'm sorry, sir, it's none of my business," she murmured, lowering her eyes again. "I'll clean the other corridor first." Caroline turned to leave, but Raphael, driven by desperation, called out to her, "Wait! What method is that? If you know something that can help, please tell me." She hesitated, biting her lower lip, clearly torn between fear of overstepping professional boundaries and something that seemed almost a need to intervene. "It's just something I learned with my son." She spoke so softly that Raphael barely heard. "You have children?" he asked as he tried to calm Marina, who was now pulling his hair with surprising strength for a baby her age. The question hung in the air for a few seconds. Caroline's face transformed, hardening and softening at the same time, as if 2 opposing emotions fought for control. "I had," she finally replied. "Oh boy." The word "had," laden with a world of pain, shot through the room like an arrow. Raphael felt the impact, immediately recognizing the grief in her voice, so familiar to his own. "I'm so sorry," he said sincerely. She merely nodded, her eyes now moist, but her face regaining its professional composure. The triplets' crying grew in intensity, as if they sensed the emotional tension that had filled the room. Michael was now screaming so hard that his tiny face was almost purple. "Please," Raphael heard himself saying, exhaustion breaking any barrier of formality between employer and employee. "If you know something that can help, anything." Caroline looked at the babies, at Raphael, and then at her own feet. She seemed to be fighting an internal battle. Finally, she placed the cleaning bucket on the floor and took a hesitant step into the room. "May I?" she asked, indicating Michael, who seemed to be in the worst state of the 3. Raphael nodded, watching as she approached the crib with slow steps. There was something in the way she moved, a mixture of determination and fear, like someone walking on thin ice. Caroline picked Michael up with surprising gentleness. The little one continued to cry, but she did not seem fazed. She adjusted him against her chest in a specific way, positioning his head exactly over her heart. Then she began to gently press the baby's back with the palm of her hand in a steady rhythm, while murmuring a lullaby. The miracle happened gradually. First, Michael's cries diminished to sobs. Then the sobs turned into small whimpers. In 5 minutes, the most impressive 5 minutes Raphael had witnessed in years, Michael was calm, his little red eyes now half open, fixed on Caroline's face. "How?" Raphael began to ask, his voice a mixture of astonishment and disbelief. "It's the sound of the heart," Caroline explained without taking her eyes off Michael. "They miss it. Babies hear their mother's heart for 9 months. It's the first sound they know, the first security. Your son is looking for something he lost." The words hit Raphael like a punch. In all the months of consultations with specialists, health checkups, theories about colic and allergies, No one had mentioned something so simple and at the same time so profound. "May I try with the others?" Caroline asked, still rocking Michael, who now seemed almost asleep. Raphael, speechless with awe, merely nodded. He placed Marina back in the crib and picked up Matthew, handing him to Caroline as he took Michael. To his surprise, the moment Michael left Caroline's chest, he started to cry again. She quickly explained, "Try to position him as I did, exactly over your heart, and apply pressure to his back like this in the rhythm of heartbeats." Raphael tried to imitate the movement, uncertain. "I don't think I'm doing it right." "It's not just the technique," Caroline said, as she positioned Matthew against her chest. "They sense your anxiety. Try to breathe deeply, let your heart beat slower." Following the instructions, Raphael struggled to calm his own breathing, surprising himself when Michael, after a few minutes, actually began to settle down in his arms. Meanwhile, Matthew had already surrendered to the same inexplicable magic in Caroline's hands. She returned him to Raphael and picked up Marina, repeating the process. "How did you learn this?" Raphael asked, watching in wonder as his daughter, normally the most difficult to calm, relaxed against Caroline's chest. A sad smile passed over the woman's lips. "When my little Peter was born, he cried a lot. I discovered by chance that if I held him exactly like this, he would calm down immediately. The doctor explained to me about the sound of the maternal heart, how it's an instinctive comfort for babies." She paused and her voice wavered slightly. After I lost him, I worked for a while as a volunteer in the newborn ward of the City General Hospital. I learned more about it there." Raphael did not ask how she had lost her son. The pain in her voice told enough of the story. Instead, he watched in silence as Caroline, a complete stranger until minutes ago, performed what seemed like a miracle in his children's room. In less than 20 minutes, the 3 babies who had spent months screaming incessantly from 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. were calm, some with heavy eyes, others observing the adults in the room with quiet curiosity. "It's unbelievable," Raphael murmured, with Marina now settled in his arms. "We tried everything. Specialists, doctors, nannies with years of experience." Caroline carefully placed Matthew back in his crib. "Sometimes the solution is simpler than it seems." "They're not sick, sir. They're grieving," Raphael completed, the realization washing over him like a wave. "How did I not see it?" "Because you are also grieving," Caroline replied with disarming simplicity. "When we are suffering, it's hard to see beyond our own pain." Something in those words touched Raphael deeply. He looked at Caroline with new eyes, seeing beyond the simple uniform and reserved posture. Here was someone who understood not only his children, but also his own suffering, in a way no one else had been able to. "I need your help," he said, the words coming out before he could think better. "Not as a cleaner, but with my children, please." Caroline took a step back, surprised. "Sir, I don't have the qualifications to—" "You have everything that's needed," Raphael interrupted, indicating the 3 now silent babies. "Look at them. No one has been able to calm them like this. No one understood what was happening." She shook her head, uncertain. "I don't know if it would be appropriate. I work for the cleaning company, I have hours. A contract—" "I'll handle it," Raphael replied with the determination of someone who commanded $1 billion company. "Name your price." "Double, triple what you currently earn, to care for my children at night, to teach them what you know." "Please, Caroline." Silence filled the room. The babies, as if understanding the importance of the moment, remained quiet, only small occasional noises escaping their lips. Caroline looked at each of the triplets, then at Raphael and finally at her own feet. She seemed to be fighting an internal battle. When she raised her face again, there was a resolution in her eyes. "I don't do this for money," she said firmly. "If I help, it will be because no child should suffer like this when there is a solution." Raphael nodded, understanding that there was something deeper at play than a simple financial transaction. "What do you need?" he asked. "Time," Caroline replied. "Time with them, to get to know them individually. Each baby is different, even being triplets, and—" She hesitated. "I need you to participate too. They need their father as much as they would need their mother." It was as if Caroline had read his darkest thoughts, the guilt that consumed him from within. Since Beatrice's passing, Raphael had buried himself in work during the day, delegating the care of the babies to hired nannies. At night, he spent hours in their room, but more out of obligation than real emotional connection. The guilt for what had happened to Beatrice created an invisible barrier between him and his children. "I don't know if I can," he admitted, feeling vulnerable in a way he would normally avoid in front of anyone, let alone an employee. Caroline looked directly at him for the first time that night. "Yes, you can. Do you see how calm she is in your arms now? They recognize you, sir. They just need to feel that you recognize them too." Marina had fallen asleep in Raphael's arms, a small miracle he never believed possible. Looking at his daughter's serene face, something inside him began to melt. "I'll do my best," he promised, not just to Caroline but to himself and, in some way, to Beatrice too. That night, for the first time in 10 months, silence reigned in the Mendel mansion between 10 p.m. and 4 a.m., a silence that hid the beginning of a transformation that none of those present could foresee, a journey that would heal not only the triplets, but also two adult hearts broken by different, yet equally devastating, losses. 3 weeks had passed since the night Caroline entered the triplets' room. The Mendel mansion breathed a different atmosphere, as if the very air had transformed. The staff whispered in corners about the silence that now dominated the early hours, replacing the symphony of cries that for months had been the house's nightly soundtrack. Raphael had resolved the situation with the efficiency typical of someone who commands a technological empire. A call to the cleaning company owner, a generous payment to release Caroline from her contract, and the signing of a new agreement. She was now officially the Mendel triplets' night caregiver, with a salary that would make many bank managers sigh with envy. That Wednesday afternoon, Caroline arrived at the mansion 2 hours before the agreed time. She no longer wore the grey uniform, but simple, comfortable clothes, jeans, a light blue blouse and sneakers. Her curly hair was loose, falling over her shoulders instead of the tight bun she wore during cleaning work. "Good afternoon." "Carolyn," greeted Janet, the housekeeper who managed the house during the day. The middle-aged woman observed her with poorly disguised curiosity. The news of the cleaner promoted to nanny had spread like wildfire among the staff. "Good afternoon," Caroline replied with a polite smile, already accustomed to the inquisitive looks that followed her through the corridors. "Mr. Mendel asked me to show you to your quarters as soon as you arrived," Janet informed her, leading her up the main staircase. "He prepared the room adjacent to the baby's room to facilitate your work." Caroline followed Janet to the second floor, where the children's wing occupied an entire section of the mansion. Unlike the last time she had been there with cleaning products, now she absorbed every detail with new eyes. The wide corridors decorated with American artworks contrasted with carefully framed family photos. In almost all of them, Raphael appeared next to a woman of serene beauty and gentle eyes, Beatrice, the mother the triplets never knew. Janet opened a door to the left of the baby's main room. "Here it is. Mr. Mendel asked for the space to be adapted to your needs." The room was spacious, decorated in shades of seafoam green and light grey, with a king-size bed, a small living area, a private bathroom, and, to Caroline's surprise, an internal door that connected directly to the triplets' room. "It's much more than I expected," Caroline commented, placing her small suitcase on an upholstered bench near the bed. Janet crossed her arms, her gaze assessing Caroline from head to toe. "Mr. Mendel can be overly generous when he's desperate," she commented with calculated coolness. "He's been like this since Mrs. Beatrice left us." Caroline met the housekeeper's gaze without flinching. "I'm not here to take advantage of anyone's desperation. Janet, I'm here for the babies." Something in her direct response seemed to surprise the housekeeper, who uncrossed her arms and sighed. 9 nannies in 1 week, some with decades of experience and impeccable references. "All fled," Janet commented, looking at Caroline with genuine curiosity now. "How did you manage to calm them?" Caroline sat on the edge of the bed, her hands unconsciously smoothing the soft fabric of the duvet. "I understand their pain," she replied simply. "It's different from colic or tantrums. It's an emptiness that needs to be filled in a specific way." Janet observed her for a few more moments, as if trying to decipher a puzzle. "Well, the babies usually wake up for their first bottle around 6 in the evening. Mr. Mendel should be home from the office by then." She headed for the door. "If you need anything, you can call on the internal intercom." When Janet left, Caroline looked around, still processing the turn her life had taken. 3 days earlier, she was cleaning corridors in this same house, always avoiding crossing paths with the inhabitants, working in the shadows of the night. Now she had a room larger than the entire apartment where she lived before losing Peter. The door connecting her room to the baby's room was ajar. Caroline walked to it and peeked into the silent environment. The 3 cribs were still arranged in a triangle, exactly as on the first night. For the past 3 days, she had spent 8 hours a night there, applying what she called the heart method to calm the triplets. Raphael had proven to be an attentive student, observing every movement, every technique, trying to reproduce the gestures with an almost scientific determination. Caroline entered the room and approached the cribs. The 3 babies slept soundly, a sight that, according to Janet, was rare before 10 at night. She leaned over Marina's crib, the only girl, observing the delicate features that resembled photos of Beatrice. "Hi, little one," she whispered, lightly touching the baby's face. "I'm here now." Marina stirred in her sleep, her lips forming a small pout. Caroline smiled, that familiar feeling of warmth expanding in her chest. That feeling, she thought, she had lost forever when she held Peter for the last time in the hospital. A noise at the main door of the room made her turn. Raphael Mendel stood there, still in his executive suit, his tie slightly loose around his neck, as if he had just loosened it. He looked different from the desperate man of 3 nights ago. Shaved, hair neatly cut, shoulders less tense. "Sorry. I didn't mean to startle you," he said in a low voice so as not to wake the babies. "It's okay," Caroline replied, moving away from the crib. "I arrived early. I just wanted to see how they were." Raphael entered the room, approaching the cribs. "Janet called me at the office, said they slept all afternoon. That's never happened before." Caroline watched as he leaned over each crib, gently touching the head of each of his children, a gesture that still seemed awkward, as if Raphael didn't fully trust his own hands to show affection. "They're catching up on lost sleep," Caroline explained. "It's common after long periods of sleep deprivation. The body needs to compensate." Raphael nodded, amazed. "Where did you learn all this?" Caroline looked away, fixing her gaze on a distant point on the wall. "When you have a child who needs special care, you learn a lot. And after Peter," she paused, the word still difficult to pronounce. "After I lost him, I spent a lot of time studying child development. I guess it was a way to maintain a connection with him." Raphael observed her with an intensity that made her feel exposed. "You never told me what happened," he commented delicately. Caroline took a deep breath. She rarely talked about it. Every word seemed to tear a piece from her heart. "Pneumonia," she finally replied. "He was 8 months old. I started to notice he was breathing strangely, a little faster than normal. I took him to the health clinic 3 times in 1 week. They always told me it was just a cold, that I was being too anxious for a first-time mother." She paused, her hand unconsciously grasping the heart-shaped pendant she wore around her neck, a gift from Peter's father, before she discovered the pregnancy and he disappeared from her life. By the 3rd time, he already had a high fever. I insisted so much that they finally did an X-ray. When the result came out, he went straight to the pediatric ICU. Caroline swallowed hard. Severe pneumonia. His lungs were already compromised. He fought for 3 days. Raphael had approached, his face a mask of genuine empathy. "I'm so sorry," he said. The same phrase everyone said, but somehow coming from him, laden with the weight of someone who also knew the pain of loss. It sounded different. "The worst part wasn't losing him," Caroline continued, the words now pouring out like a long-held torrent. "It was knowing it could have been avoided. If they had listened to me the first time, if they had done the X-ray earlier, I spent all my savings on lawyers trying to sue the hospital. 2 years of legal battle just to hear that the proper protocols were followed." A solitary tear ran down Caroline's face, which she quickly wiped away. "Sorry, I don't know why I'm telling you all this." Raphael did not respond immediately. His eyes scanned the room, the space he had prepared for his children with the help of the country's best interior designers, every detail thought out to offer maximum comfort and stimulation to the babies. A space that, despite all the luxury, had failed to provide what they needed most. "You lost your son due to the negligence of people who were supposed to care for him," Raphael finally said. "I lost my wife because I didn't have the courage to contradict her," to insist on what the doctors recommended. He looked at the triplets. Different guilts, but equally devastating. The silence that followed was not awkward, but almost comforting. The silence of two people who, for a brief moment, did not need to explain their pain. It was Michael who broke the moment, waking with a small whimper that soon threatened to turn into crying. Before Raphael could react, Caroline was already by the crib, picking up the baby with the expertise of someone who knew exactly what to do. "Hello, little one," she murmured, positioning him against her chest exactly over her heart. "Did you have a good dream? Are you hungry now?" To Raphael's astonishment, Michael immediately stopped what promised to be the beginning of a crying fit, fixing his blue eyes, identical to Beatrice's, on Caroline's face. "How do you do that?" Raphael asked, amazed. "It's like magic." Caroline smiled, gently swaying her body as Michael completely calmed down. "It's not magic. It's connection. Babies are much more perceptive than most people imagine. They sense our emotional state, our energy. If you're anxious, they become anxious. If you're calm, they calm down." Raphael watched, fascinated, as Caroline walked around the room with Michael, who now seemed perfectly content in her arms. "I think it must be time for his bottle," she commented. "The other two should wake up soon, too." As if to confirm her words, Marina began to stir in her crib, followed by Matthew. "I'll ask the kitchen to prepare the bottles," Raphael said, heading for the intercom on the wall. As he gave the instructions, Caroline noticed how his posture had changed in recent days. It wasn't just his physical appearance. The bearded, disheveled man from the first night had given way to a well-groomed executive, but something more subtle in his manner of being in his children's room. Before, he seemed like a stranger in hostile territory. Now he moved more naturally, as if he was finally starting to feel he belonged in that space. In a few minutes, one of the maids arrived with 3 perfectly prepared bottles at the ideal temperature. Raphael thanked her, and to Caroline's surprise, picked up one of the bottles and approached Marina, who was now fully awake, waving her little arms in the air. "May I try?" he asked Caroline, as if he needed permission to feed his own daughter. "Of course," she replied with an encouraging smile. Raphael carefully took Marina from the crib, imitating the way he had seen Caroline do it, positioning the baby against his chest before offering the bottle. "That's right," Caroline encouraged as she fed Michael. "Maintain eye contact with her while she takes the bottle. Connection is important." Raphael obeyed, his eyes meeting his daughter's. Marina looked back at him, her tiny fingers grasping the bottle as she sucked eagerly. "She's actually looking at me," he commented, surprised. Caroline smiled. "Of course she is. She recognizes you. You're her father." Something in those simple words seemed to touch Raphael deeply. For 10 months, he had felt more like a distant provider than a real father. A busy businessman who signed checks for nannies and doctors, but who, emotionally, kept his distance from his own children, protecting himself from the pain they involuntarily caused him, the constant reminder of Beatrice, of his guilt, of his loss. Matthew began to whimper in his crib, interrupting the moment. Caroline looked at Raphael, who was still feeding Marina. "I'll get Matthew as soon as I'm done with Michael," she said. "No, I can—" Raphael hesitated, looking at Marina in his arms and at Matthew in the crib. "I can't hold both at the same time." Caroline thought for a moment. "Try sitting in the armchair. You can position Marina in one arm and Matthew in the other." "I've done it a few times. It's possible to feed 2 at once, but you need the right position." Raphael seemed uncertain, but followed the suggestion, sitting in the large nursing armchair he had originally bought for Beatrice. With Caroline's guidance, he managed to position Marina comfortably against his left side, still with the bottle, while she placed Matthew in his right arm. "That's right. Adjust your arm a little." "Perfect," Caroline instructed, handing the second bottle to Raphael. Matthew, always the hungriest of the 3, grabbed the bottle with enthusiasm. Raphael found himself feeding 2 of his children simultaneously, something he never believed he was capable of doing alone. "I'm actually doing it," he commented, a note of pride in his voice. Caroline nodded, sitting in the armchair next to him with Michael, who was almost finished with his bottle. "You were always capable. You just needed someone to show you how." The four remained like that for several minutes, Raphael feeding, Marina and Matthew, Caroline with Michael, a comfortable silence filling the room. To an outside observer, they might have seemed like a normal family sharing an everyday moment. Nothing would indicate the extraordinary circumstances that had brought them together. "Tomorrow I have a video conference with European investors," Raphael commented as Matthew finished his bottle. "Normally I'd stay at the office late, but I thought I'd participate from home. That way I can follow what you do with them more closely." Caroline smiled. "I think that's an excellent idea. I was thinking of implementing a more structured night routine. It would be good if you could participate." Michael let out a little burp, making Caroline laugh as she wiped a trickle of milk from the baby's chin. "What is that like?" Raphael asked. "What?" "That connection you have with them. It's so natural." Caroline thought for a moment before answering. "When Peter was in the ICU, there was a nurse who explained something to me that I never forgot. She said that caring for a baby isn't just about techniques or knowledge. It's about presence, being truly present for the child with your whole being." She caressed Michael's hair. "I think when we lose someone we love deeply, our capacity to be present expands. Pain teaches us the value of every moment." Raphael absorbed the words, watching his two children now almost asleep in his arms. "I don't know if I know how to do that. Be present, I mean. I've always been good at solving problems, at finding practical solutions. But this, it's a skill like any other," Caroline replied gently. "It can be learned with practice. Would you teach me?" The question came out before Raphael could filter it, surprising both of them. Caroline looked at him for a long moment. There was a vulnerability in that powerful man that touched her deeply. The contrast between the imposing businessman who commanded hundreds of employees and the lost father who didn't know how to connect with his own children. "Yes," she replied simply. "I can teach you." The moment was interrupted by a knock at the door. Janet entered, carrying a tray with 2 covered plates. "I thought you might want to have dinner here in the room while you take care of the babies," she explained, placing the tray on a side table. "The chef prepared grilled salmon with vegetables." "Thank you, Janet," Raphael said. "That was very thoughtful." The housekeeper looked at the 2 with the babies, an indecipherable expression quickly crossing her face before she recomposed herself. "If you need anything else, just call." She headed for the door but stopped before leaving. "Oh, I almost forgot. Mrs. Albright called. Said she's arriving tomorrow from Miami for a visit." Raphael visibly tensed. "My mother-in-law is coming." "Yes, sir." Said she's eager to see her grandchildren. "Should I prepare the usual guest room?" Raphael seemed momentarily lost in thought before nodding. "Yes, please. Thank you for letting me know." When Janet left, Caroline noticed the change in atmosphere. The mention of his mother-in-law had brought an almost palpable tension to the room. "Veronica has always been challenging," Raphael commented, answering Caroline's unasked question. "Since Beatrice passed away, she's been even more difficult. She criticizes everything. The doctors I hire, the nannies, the room decor, even the brand of diapers." "She's grieving too," Caroline observed softly. "People express pain in different ways." Raphael sighed. "I know. And I understand that the triplets are her last link to her daughter. But sometimes it feels like she blames me for what happened to Beatrice." He paused. "And maybe she's right." Caroline placed Michael, now asleep, in his crib before replying. "Guilt is a complicated feeling. It rarely helps us, but it seems impossible to let go of." She approached, helping Raphael up with the 2 babies. "I believe your wife made her choice consciously, and that she entrusted you with the care of her children because she knew you would be capable." Raphael looked at her with silent gratitude as they placed Matthew and Marina in their respective cribs. The 3 babies, now fed and calm, fell asleep almost instantly. "I think we should eat before it gets cold," Caroline suggested, indicating the tray Janet had brought. They sat in the armchairs near the window, plates on their laps, watching the triplets sleep peacefully. "When Veronica arrives tomorrow and sees that you've replaced the German nanny with 3 doctorates with a—" Raphael stopped, clearly searching for a word that wouldn't sound offensive, "with an unqualified cleaner." Caroline completed with a slight smile. "Don't worry, I've faced worse prejudices." Raphael seemed embarrassed. "That's not what I was going to say. But it's what your mother-in-law will think," Caroline replied pragmatically. And that's okay. The important thing is that the babies are well. The rest is secondary. As they ate in comfortable silence, observing the peaceful sleep of the triplets, something quietly changed in that room. A new configuration began to form, not that of employer and employee, nor just father and caregiver, but something more complex and indefinable. Something that, without either of them realizing it yet, was gradually filling the voids that pain had left in their lives. Outside the mansion, the New York City sky darkened. City lights began to dot the urban landscape. Somewhere miles away, a middle-aged woman closed her travel bag, her face a mask of determination. Veronica Albright had no idea of the changes that had occurred in her son-in-law's house, but in less than 24 hours, she would find out. And she would not be pleased at all. The black Jaguar parked in the circular driveway of the mansion at 9 in the morning, punctual as always. Veronica Albright tolerated no delays, not even her own. The 58-year-old woman emerged from the vehicle with the elegance of someone who had frequented Miami's most exclusive social circles for decades. Her hair impeccably dyed a golden brown, a face that showed some visits to the plastic surgeon, not too many, just enough to maintain a naturally youthful appearance, and a grape-colored skirt and blazer set that subtly declared her social status. "Mrs. Albright, welcome," greeted Robert, the butler, rushing to help her with her designer luggage. "Thank you, Robert. Is Raphael home?" she asked as she ascended the entrance steps, her heels echoing on the marble. "Yes, madam, Mr. Mendel is working in the home office today. He asked to be informed as soon as you arrived." Veronica nodded, her eyes already scanning the entrance hall, looking for signs of neglect or change since her last visit 2 months ago. Everything seemed in order, the artworks in their correct places, the floral arrangements fresh, the floor shining as she approved. Raphael might be a business genius, but in Veronica's opinion, he needed constant supervision when it came to household management, especially now that Beatrice was no longer present to ensure everything ran as it should. Beatrice. Even after almost a year, her daughter's name still caused physical pain like a stab to the chest. Veronica adjusted her posture, straightening her shoulders and raising her chin. Emotional weakness was not an option she allowed herself to show, not even when she was alone. "Grandma!" Raphael's voice sounded down the corridor as he descended the stairs, still wearing what was clearly his video conference attire, a light blue dress shirt, dark tie and dress pants, but barefoot, a detail that did not escape Veronica's critical eye. "Raphael, dear," she replied, allowing herself to be briefly hugged. "Working from home today? That's new. I've been reorganizing my schedule to spend more time with the children," he explained, leading her to the living room. "Would you like some coffee before seeing the triplets? They should be waking up from their morning nap." Veronica noticed something different about her son-in-law. It wasn't just the reorganized schedule. There was something in his eyes, a light she hadn't seen since before Beatrice's passing. Less tension in his shoulders, too. Intrigued, she accepted the coffee, discreetly studying him as they sat on the white sofas in the main living room. "Last time we spoke on the phone, you were desperate about the nanny situation," Veronica commented, accepting the cup of coffee a maid brought. "Any news in that department? Did you finally find someone competent?" A small smile appeared on Raphael's face. "Actually, yes. The situation has improved considerably in recent days." "Excellent. Who is she? Any international references? Did you manage to poach someone from the British royal family?" Veronica joked, though her tone suggested she would consider such a hire perfectly reasonable. Raphael hesitated for a moment, and Veronica immediately realized there was something he wasn't saying. "She's an American professional, actually. She has a unique method that has worked surprisingly well with the triplets." "Unique method?" Veronica repeated, one eyebrow raised. "What kind of method?" Raphael took a sip of coffee, clearly buying time to formulate his answer. "It's hard to explain. It has to do with emotional connection, with understanding what's really causing their crying." "And what is causing it, according to this specialist?" Veronica asked, her voice now carrying a skeptical note. "Grief," Raphael replied simply. "The babies are grieving for Beatrice." Veronica froze, the cup halfway to her lips. For an instant, the mask of control fell, revealing the raw pain beneath. As quickly as it appeared, the vulnerability vanished, replaced by indignation. "That's Absurd. They never knew Beatrice. How could they be grieving for someone they never saw? Raphael placed his cup on the coffee table. Apparently, the connection begins long before birth. They hear her heart for 9 months. They recognize her voice, her smell. When they're born and that presence completely disappears, pseudoscience, Veronica interrupted, shaking her head in disapproval. You've always been so rational, Raphael. I'm surprised you've fallen for this kind of soft talk. The results speak for themselves, Raphael replied, with a calm that surprised even himself. For the first time in 10 months, the babies sleep through the night. They're no longer having those inconsolable crying episodes. They're happier, more responsive. Veronica narrowed her eyes. Who exactly is this woman? What's her background, her credentials? The moment Raphael feared had arrived. He took a deep breath before answering. Her name is Caroline Summers. She doesn't have an academic background in child development, but she possesses exceptional practical knowledge and a unique sensitivity with the babies. Veronica placed the cup on the table with a louder clink than necessary. You hired someone without formal qualifications to care for my grandchildren. Beatrice's children, is that what I'm understanding? So I know it seems unusual. Unusual? Veronica interrupted, her voice rising an octave. It's completely irresponsible. After everything that happened to Beatrice, I thought you'd be more careful about the people you put near the children. Raphael felt a pang of guilt, as always happened when Veronica mentioned, even indirectly, Beatrice's passing. The insinuation was always present, if he had insisted more. If he had been firmer about the risks of pregnancy, perhaps her daughter would still be alive. Caroline achieved what none of the qualified professionals could. Raphael replied, keeping his voice low but firm. She understands the triplets in a way that... Please tell me you at least checked her background, her references, Veronica interrupted, massaging her temples as if a migraine was starting. Where did she come from? Who recommended her? Raphael hesitated again, and Veronica immediately caught on. Her eyes widened with realization. My God, Raphael, you didn't do a proper check, did you? You just brought a stranger into your house near the babies, without knowing anything about her. It's not quite like that, Raphael began to explain, but was interrupted by a soft voice coming from the entrance of the room. Mrs. Albright, it's a pleasure to finally meet you. Both turned to find Caroline standing in the doorway, wearing simple jeans and a white blouse, her hair tied in a casual ponytail. She held Michael in her arms, who seemed perfectly content playing with a small teether. Veronica stood up immediately, her eyes scanning Caroline from head to toe in a quick and merciless assessment. And you are... Caroline Summers, she replied with a polite smile, entering the room. I'm the triplets' new caregiver. Veronica looked at the baby in Caroline's arms, her expression involuntarily softening upon seeing her grandson. Michael is awake, Caroline continued, approaching. I thought you might like to see him. It was a clever move, and Raphael realized it immediately. By bringing Michael, Caroline had effectively disarmed Veronica, at least temporarily. The grandmother wouldn't be able to maintain her aggressive posture with one of the babies present. Of course I want to see my grandson, Veronica replied, extending her arms to take Michael. The baby, however, clung to Caroline's blouse, turning his face to hide it in her chest. Veronica froze, arms still extended, an expression of shock and hurt crossing her face. He doesn't recognize me. He's just a little shy, Caroline explained gently. It's been 2 months since your last visit. It's normal for him to need a little time to get used to you again. I never had problems with the babies before, Veronica insisted, letting her arms fall, clearly shaken by her grandson's rejection. They always came right to me. Raphael noticed his mother-in-law's expression, wounded pride mixed with a genuine vulnerability she rarely showed. Perhaps if you sit down, Caroline suggested tactfully. Michael is more reserved than the other two. He needs to observe a bit before feeling comfortable. Something in the way Caroline spoke, with knowledge, but without arrogance, seemed to calm Veronica slightly, who sat down again. You seem to know their temperaments well, she commented, watching as Caroline sat on the opposite sofa, positioning Michael facing his grandmother, but still secure in her lap. Each one has a very distinct personality, Caroline replied, smiling at the baby. Marina is the most expressive, always making noises and movements to communicate exactly what she wants. Matthew is the most physical, loves to be rocked and needs a lot of tactile stimulation. And Michael, she caressed the boy's head. Michael is the observer. He likes to study situations before getting involved. Veronica looked at Raphael, who was observing the interaction with interest. She certainly seems to know the children, she admitted reluctantly. Look, Michael, Caroline said softly, pointing to Veronica. Who is this? It's Grandma who came to visit you. Slowly, Michael turned his little face to look at Veronica, still clinging to Caroline's blouse, but now visibly curious. Hi, my love, Veronica said, her voice completely transforming, the harshness giving way to a sweet tone Raphael rarely heard. Grandma brought presents for you and your little siblings. Michael blinked, his big blue eyes, so much like Beatrice's, fixed on his grandmother. After a few moments, he let out a small gurgle and extended a tiny hand towards her. See, he's recognizing you, Caroline encouraged. Do you want to try holding him now? Veronica nodded, extending her arms again. This time, when Caroline leaned to transfer the baby, Michael allowed himself to be passed into his grandmother's lap, although he kept his eyes fixed on Caroline, as if to ensure she wouldn't go far. He's so big, Veronica commented, emotion evident in her voice as she adjusted her grandson in her lap. I can't believe how fast they grow. They've developed a lot in the last few weeks, Raphael commented. The pediatrician was impressed at the last checkup. Veronica gently rocked Michael, observing every detail of his tiny face. He looked so much like Beatrice. The same eyes, the same chin. Her voice faltered slightly. Caroline exchanged a look with Raphael, who subtly nodded. I'll go get Matthew and Marina, she said, standing up. They should be awake now, too. When Caroline left, Veronica waited a few seconds before turning her attention to Raphael. Where did you find this young woman? She asked in a low voice, but with intensity. Raphael decided that honesty would be the best approach. She worked as a cleaner here in the house on the night shift. She was the one who managed to calm the triplets for the first time. Veronica's eyes widened. You hired your cleaner as a nanny for my grandchildren. It's not that simple, Veronica, Raphael replied, tired of the constant judgment. Caroline has a natural gift with children, and more importantly, she understands their pain. And how would a cleaner understand the pain of my grandchildren? Veronica asked with skepticism. Raphael hesitated, uncertain whether he should share Caroline's personal story. He decided it was necessary for Veronica to understand. Caroline lost her only son 2 years ago. An 8-month-old boy, pneumonia that wasn't diagnosed in time. The information seemed to hit Veronica like a punch. Her expression changed, indignation giving way to shock, and finally to a reluctant understanding. So that's why. She knows grief. Exactly. She understands what the babies are feeling, because she lived through her own devastating loss. Raphael paused, choosing his next words carefully. I know you want the best for the triplets, Veronica. I do too. And right now, I sincerely believe Caroline is the best for them. Veronica did not respond immediately. Instead, she focused her attention on Michael, who was now comfortably playing with the pearl necklace she wore. How do you know you can trust her? She finally asked, her voice softer. Sometimes you just know, Raphael replied, surprised by the certainty he felt. But if it reassures you, I had a full background check done after I officially hired her. No criminal record, impeccable references from previous jobs, including a period as a volunteer in the neonatal ward of the City General Hospital. Veronica nodded slowly, processing the information. Before she could reply, Caroline returned, carrying Marina in her right arm and holding Matthew's hand, who was clumsily walking beside her, still learning to master the art of standing. Look who came to see Grandma, Caroline announced with genuine enthusiasm. Matthew, upon seeing Veronica, let go of Caroline's hand and stumbled towards his grandmother, letting out joyful squeals. Marina, in turn, watched the scene with wide eyes, her little face a mixture of curiosity and caution. My prince, Veronica exclaimed, unable to hide her smile. Are you walking already? He started 3 days ago, Raphael explained proudly. He still falls a lot, but he's determined. Matthew reached the sofa where Veronica was sitting with Michael and clung to her skirt, raising his face with a toothless grin that would melt the hardest heart. Caroline approached, sitting next to Veronica, so Marina could also see her grandmother up close. "Hello, little princess," Veronica greeted, extending a finger that Marina immediately grabbed, examining the emerald ring with childish fascination. For a few minutes, the room was filled only with the happy sounds of the babies and spontaneous comments about their development. Raphael watched, marveling at the transformation. It was Veronica's first visit, where the triplets were not crying uncontrollably or sedated by colic medication. "They seem happy," Veronica commented, surprise evident in her voice. "They are," Caroline confirmed. "We're still working on many things, but we've made great progress." Veronica studied Caroline for a long moment. "Raphael told me about your son," she finally said. "I'm sorry for your loss." A brief flash of pain crossed Caroline's face, but she nodded in thanks. "And I'm sorry for the loss of your daughter." The triplets have her eyes. Something in that simple exchange of condolences seemed to establish a temporary truce between the two women. It wasn't friendship, not even full acceptance, but a mutual recognition of the pain they both carried. "Janet mentioned that you prepared a room for Caroline next to the baby's room?" Veronica asked Raphael, her tone carefully neutral. "Yes, to facilitate night care," Raphael confirmed, trying not to sound defensive. "It has been essential to maintain the new routine." "I see," Veronica replied, her tone indecipherable. She adjusted Michael in her lap, who was starting to get restless. "Have they had breakfast yet?" "Yes," Caroline replied. "But they'll be ready for a mid-morning snack soon. Raphael and I are trying to establish regular feeding times." Veronica raised an eyebrow at Raphael and I, but made no comment. Instead, she turned to her son-in-law. "I thought perhaps we could take the children for a walk today. It's a beautiful day. A little morning sun would do them good." "Excellent idea," Raphael agreed, seeming relieved by the practical suggestion. "The park down the street has a great playground area." "I could get the children ready while you two finish talking," Caroline offered, sensing that Veronica probably wanted a moment alone with Raphael. "That would be great." "Thank you," Veronica replied with formal politeness. When Caroline left with the three babies, Veronica waited a few seconds before turning her attention to Raphael. "Where did you get this young woman?" she asked in a low voice but with intensity. Raphael decided that honesty would be the best approach. She worked as a cleaner here in the house on the night shift. She was the one who managed to calm the triplets for the first time. Veronica's eyes widened. "You hired your cleaner as a nanny for my grandchildren?" "It's not that simple, Veronica," Raphael replied, tired of the constant judgment. "Caroline has a natural gift with children. And more importantly, she understands their pain." "And how would a cleaner understand the pain of my grandchildren?" Veronica asked with skepticism. Raphael hesitated, uncertain whether he should share Caroline's personal story. He decided it was necessary for Veronica to understand. Caroline lost her only son 2 years ago, an 8-month-old boy. Pneumonia that wasn't diagnosed in time. The information seemed to hit Veronica like a punch. Her expression changed, indignation giving way to shock, and finally to a reluctant understanding. "So that's why—" "She knows grief." "Exactly. She understands what the babies are feeling because she lived through her own devastating loss." Raphael paused, choosing his next words carefully. "I know you want the best for the triplets, Veronica. I do too. And right now I sincerely believe Caroline is the best for them." Veronica did not respond immediately. Instead, she focused her attention on Michael, who was now comfortably playing with the pearl necklace she wore. "How do you know you can trust her?" she finally asked, her voice softer. "Sometimes you just know," Raphael replied, surprised by the certainty he felt. "But if it reassures you, I had a full background check done after I officially hired her. No criminal record, impeccable references from previous jobs, including a period as a volunteer in the neonatal ward of the City General Hospital." Veronica nodded slowly, processing the information. Before she could reply, Caroline returned, carrying Marina in her right arm and holding Matthew's hand, who was clumsily walking beside her, still learning to master the art of standing. "Look who came to see Grandma," Caroline announced with genuine enthusiasm. Matthew, upon seeing Veronica, let go of Caroline's hand and stumbled towards his grandmother, letting out joyful squeals. Marina, in turn, watched the scene with wide eyes, her little face a mixture of curiosity and caution. "My prince," Veronica exclaimed, unable to hide her smile. Are you walking already? He started 3 days ago, Raphael explained proudly. He still falls a lot, but he's determined. Matthew reached the sofa where Veronica was sitting with Michael and clung to her skirt, raising his face with a toothless grin that would melt the hardest heart. Caroline approached, sitting next to Veronica so Marina could also see her grandmother up close. "Hello, a little princess," Veronica greeted, extending a finger that Marina immediately grabbed, examining the emerald ring with childish fascination. For a few minutes, the room was filled only with the happy sounds of the babies and spontaneous comments about their development. Raphael watched, marveling at the transformation. It was Veronica's first visit, where the triplets were not crying uncontrollably or sedated by colic medication. "They seem happy," Veronica commented, the surprise evident in her voice. "They are," Caroline confirmed. "We're still working on many things, but we've made great progress." Veronica studied Caroline for a long moment. "Raphael told me about your son," she finally said. "I'm sorry for your loss." A brief flash of pain crossed Caroline's face, but she nodded in thanks. "And I'm sorry for the loss of your daughter." The triplets have her eyes. Something in that simple exchange of condolences seemed to establish a temporary truce between the two women. It wasn't friendship, not even full acceptance, but a mutual recognition of the pain they both carried. "Janet mentioned that you prepared a room for Caroline next to the baby's room?" Veronica asked Raphael, her tone carefully neutral. "Yes, to facilitate night care," Raphael confirmed, trying not to sound defensive. "It has been essential to maintain the new routine." "I see," Veronica replied, her tone indecipherable. She adjusted Michael in her lap, who was starting to get restless. "Have they had breakfast yet?" "Yes," Caroline replied. "But they'll be ready for a mid-morning snack soon. Raphael and I are trying to establish regular feeding times." Veronica raised an eyebrow at Raphael and I, but made no comment. Instead, she turned to her son-in-law. "I thought perhaps we could take the children for a walk today. It's a beautiful day. A little morning sun would do them good." "Excellent idea," Raphael agreed, seeming relieved by the practical suggestion. "The park down the street has a great playground area." "I could get the children ready while you two finish talking," Caroline offered, sensing that Veronica probably wanted a moment alone with Raphael. "That would be great." "Thank you," Veronica replied with formal politeness. When Caroline left with the 3 babies, Veronica waited until she was sure they were out of earshot before turning to Raphael. "She seems competent," she admitted, though her tone suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. "She's more than competent, Veronica. She's transformative," Raphael replied with a conviction that surprised his mother-in-law. "You didn't see what this house was like before. The desperation, the chaos, the complete helplessness we felt in the face of their suffering." Still, Raphael a cleaner, Veronica couldn't help the comment, though her tone was more of concern than judgment now. "Forget what she did before," Raphael insisted. "See what she's doing now. See how the triplets are responding to her." Veronica sighed, running a hand through her perfectly styled hair. "You're right. The babies seem well. Better than I've seen them in a long time, actually." She paused. "But Raphael, I have to ask, is there something else going on here? Between you and this Caroline?" The question caught Raphael by surprise. "What? No, of course not. She works for me. She cares for my children. And she lives in your house, next to your room," Veronica added. "And from what I've observed, you two seem comfortable with each other." "Veronica, it's been less than a year since Beatrice passed," Raphael replied, a touch of indignation in his voice. "How can you think I'd already be—" "People deal with grief in different ways," Veronica interrupted, her tone surprisingly gentle. "And you're young, Raphael. You have 3 small children and a whole life ahead of you. It wouldn't be shocking if you sought comfort." Raphael shook his head, disturbed by the direction of the conversation. "There's nothing going on between Caroline and me beyond a professional relationship and shared care for the triplets." Veronica studied Raphael's face, looking for signs of hesitation or guilt. Finding none, she nodded slightly. "All right. I'm just looking out for my family's interests." "I know," Raphael replied, reaching out to briefly touch his mother-in-law's arm. "And I appreciate that. The triplets need their grandmother in their lives. You're the strongest link they have to Beatrice." The mention of her daughter softened Veronica visibly. For a moment, Raphael glimpsed the woman behind the controlling facade. a mother who had lost her only child and who desperately clung to her grandchildren as her last link to her. "I'll try to keep an open mind about your—" "Caroline," Veronica finally said, "for now. But I'll be watching." "I wouldn't expect anything less," Raphael replied with a small smile. As they stood to join the children for the park outing, Raphael couldn't help but reflect on Veronica's question. It was true that there was nothing romantic going on between him and Caroline. They had known each other for only a few days, and both carried deep wounds that were still far from healing. But there was something undeniable between them, a connection based on shared losses and mutual dedication to the triplets. Could it be that, as his mother-in-law insinuated, this connection could one day turn into something more? Raphael pushed the thought away, considering it inappropriate and premature. Now was not the time for such reflections. The focus needed to remain on the children and their well-being. When they reached the entrance hall, they found Caroline already with the triplets ready for the outing. 3 small hats to protect them from the sun, sunscreen applied to their faces and arms, a bag with diapers, wet wipes, and snacks prepared. "Are you ready?" Caroline asked with a smile, handing Matthew to Raphael. "Yes," replied Veronica, picking up Marina while Caroline held Michael. "Let's show these little ones how to enjoy a morning at the park." As they stepped out into the sunlight, Raphael couldn't help but notice the contrast between the two women. Veronica, with her impeccable outfit and expensive jewelry, Caroline in simple jeans and comfortable sneakers. So different in origins, lifestyles, and personalities, yet united, at least temporarily, by the love they felt for the 3 small creatures in their arms. What Raphael didn't realize, however, was the calculating look Veronica cast at Caroline when no one was watching. A look that clearly said, "I will find out who you really are, Caroline Summers, and if there's anything in your past that could threaten my grandchildren or the memory of my daughter, rest assured I will find it." The truce established was, at best, temporary, and the battle for control of the Mendel family was just beginning. 3 weeks had passed since Veronica's arrival at the Mendel mansion. What was supposed to be a visit of a few days extended when the matriarch announced that she had reorganized her commitments in Miami to more closely follow her grandchildren's development. Raphael knew the real reason was Caroline. Veronica wanted to observe the new caregiver, study her influence on the triplets and, above all, ensure that her place as the family's matriarchal figure was not usurped. During this period, a cautious routine was established. Caroline cared for the babies most of the time, implementing what she called the heart method, a personalized approach that respected the specific emotional needs of each triplet. Veronica observed, sometimes intervened, occasionally praised, but never completely let down her guard. That Saturday morning, the sun streamed through the wide windows of the music room, where Caroline had organized a sensory stimulation session for the babies. Matthew, the most physical of the 3, crawled happily among colorful cushions scattered on the floor. Michael was sitting, concentrating on a wooden xylophone Caroline had brought. Marina, in turn, swayed her body to the rhythm of the soft music playing, displaying a surprising sense of rhythm for a baby of almost 11 months. "The child neuropsychologist would be impressed," commented Raphael, who observed the scene from the doorway, holding a cup of coffee. He had cancelled a Saturday meeting to be present, something unthinkable months ago. "They are very intelligent children," Caroline replied, sitting on the floor with the triplets. "They just needed emotional space to show it." Raphael entered the room, sitting on one of the cushions. Immediately, Marina abandoned her improvised dance and quickly crawled towards her father, letting out joyful squeals. "Good morning, Princess," he greeted her, picking her up and kissing her cheek. "Are you dancing? Are you going to be a ballerina like Mommy?" The mention of Beatrice still hurt, but Raphael had learned, with Caroline's guidance, the importance of talking about their mother with the triplets. "They need to know her through you," she had explained. "Even if they don't have their own memories of her, they can have the memories you share." Marina grabbed her father's tie, fascinated by the silk texture. Raphael laughed, letting her explore the accessory. In recent days, there was a lightness about him that Caroline noticed with growing satisfaction. The tense, guilt-ridden man she had met that first night was gradually giving way to a present father, who found genuine joy in the company of his children. "Where is Mrs. Albright?" Caroline asked, helping Michael produce sounds on the xylophone. "She left early for some appointment. Didn't go into details, just said she'd be back for lunch." Caroline nodded, trying not to show the relief she felt. The 3 weeks of living with Veronica had been a constant exercise in patience and diplomacy. Raphael's mother-in-law alternated between moments of reluctant approval when she saw the triplets' progress and periods of veiled criticism of Caroline's unconventional methodologies. "I was thinking of taking the children to my office today," Raphael commented, adjusting Marina in his lap. "What do you think? Are they old enough now to benefit from a change of environment?" Caroline smiled. It was another piece of evidence of Raphael's transformation. Now he wanted to incorporate his children into all aspects of his life, not just at convenient times. "I think that's an excellent idea. New experiences are fundamental for their cognitive development." She looked at Michael, who was now tapping the colored keys with absolute concentration. Michael especially would benefit. He loves to visually explore new environments. "Perfect. We can go after their morning snack and come back for lunch. The headquarters aren't far from here." As they discussed the logistical details of the outing, neither of them noticed Matthew, who had stealthily moved away in his exploration of the room. It was only when they heard the sound of something falling that they realized the baby had reached a lower shelf where some picture frames were displayed. "Matthew," Raphael called, getting up with Marina still in his lap. Caroline was already on her way but stopped when she saw what had happened. Matthew was sitting on the floor, looking fascinated at a photograph he had knocked over. The glass of the frame was cracked but not broken. "Let me see, dear," Caroline said gently, kneeling beside the boy. He handed her the picture frame without resistance, more interested in the image than the object itself. Caroline looked at the photograph and felt a wave of emotion. It was Beatrice, clearly in the last stages of pregnancy. One hand on her enormous belly, the other holding an ice cream. Her face glowed with that radiance only pregnant women possess, and her smile was radiant, despite the visible discomfort that multiple pregnancies must cause. "Mama?" Matthew babbled, pointing to the photograph. Silence fell over the room. Caroline and Raphael exchanged astonished glances. It was the first time any of the triplets had tried to say "Mommy." "Yes, Matthew," Raphael replied, his voice choked with emotion. "That's Mommy, with you three in her tummy." Caroline delicately wiped the cracked glass and handed the picture frame to Matthew, who held the image with his tiny hands, his little face fixed on the photograph of a mother he had never known. "Mama," he repeated, more confident this time. Michael, noticing the commotion, abandoned his xylophone and crawled over to his brother, curious to see what had caused such a reaction. Marina squirmed in her father's lap, also wanting to join her brothers. Raphael placed Marina on the floor and knelt beside the three, holding the picture frame so that everyone could see. "This is your mommy," he said, his voice controlled but laden with emotion. "Her name was Beatrice. She loved you more than anything in the world." Caroline observed the scene, feeling simultaneously a part of it and an intruder. It was a sacred moment for that family, the first time the triplets truly seemed to make the connection with their absent mother. "We should get more photos of her from the albums," Caroline suggested softly. "Put them within their reach, in their room, in the playroom." Raphael nodded, running a hand through his hair. "Yes, you're right, I kept the photos stored away. It was hard to see them every day." "I understand completely," Caroline replied. "I did the same with Peter's photos at first, but then I realized that seeing them, even with the pain, helped me keep his memory alive." Michael now touched the glass of the photograph, his tiny fingers tracing the outline of Beatrice's face. Marina tilted her head, as if trying to understand the relationship between that two-dimensional image and the concept of mommy that was beginning to form in her developing mind. "Mama," Matthew repeated, now looking at his father, as if asking for confirmation. "Yes, son." "Mommy?" Raphael confirmed, emotion finally overcoming the control he maintained, a tear escaping and sliding down his face. Caroline instinctively reached out, touching Raphael's shoulder in a gesture of comfort. He placed his own hand over hers, squeezing it gently in silent gratitude. The intimate moment was interrupted by the sound of the front door opening. Seconds later, Veronica appeared at the entrance to the music room, carrying several bags from luxury children's stores. "Hello, family," she greeted cheerfully before sensing the emotional atmosphere of the room. Her eyes quickly located the picture frame in Matthew's hands. "What happened here?" "Matthew said mommy for the first time," Raphael explained, discreetly wiping away the tear. "He found this photo of Beatrice." Veronica put the bags on the floor and quickly approached, emotion visible on her usually controlled face. "Oh my God, he recognized his mother." "In a way," Caroline replied, gently removing her hand from Raphael's shoulder, aware of Veronica's watchful gaze. It was a very special moment. Veronica knelt beside Matthew, taking the picture frame from his hands gently. "This is Mommy, my love. My beautiful daughter." Her voice faltered on the last word. "Mama," Matthew repeated, proud of his new word. Veronica looked at Raphael, then at Caroline. "Have you been talking about Beatrice with them?" "We've been trying to introduce the concept," Raphael explained. Caroline suggested it would be important for them to form an image of their mother, even if it's through our memories. Veronica seemed genuinely surprised. She turned her gaze to Caroline, assessing her with new eyes. That was a good suggestion, she finally admitted. Then, turning her attention to the bag she had brought, "I bought some presents for the babies. New clothes, educational toys, children's books." "Veronica, you've already brought enough presents to open a store," Raphael commented with a smile. "It's never too much," she replied, starting to take items out of the bags. "Look, I found these little UV protective shirts. Perfect for the upcoming summer." As Veronica showed off her purchases, Caroline discreetly began to organize the room, gathering the scattered toys and preparing for the triplets' morning snack. "I was thinking of taking the children to my office today," Raphael commented to his mother-in-law. "Would you like to come with us?" "I can't today, unfortunately. I have lunch with my club friends," Veronica replied, busy showing a texture book to Michael, who had approached curiously. Then, as if remembering something important, she added, "Oh, I almost forgot. I met someone interesting this morning." Raphael raised an eyebrow. "Oh, really?" "Yes, at the coffee shop nearby. A former employee of the nanny agency you used to hire." Veronica kept her tone casual, but there was something calculated in her way of introducing the subject. "We had a very informative conversation." Caroline, who was folding a blanket on the other side of the room, felt a shiver run down her spine. There was something in Veronica's tone that put her on alert. "What a coincidence," Raphael commented distractedly, helping Marina try on a new hat Veronica had brought. "It wasn't exactly a coincidence," Veronica admitted. "I sought her out. I was curious about the previous nannies, you know? I wanted to understand why so many qualified professionals gave up so quickly." Raphael frowned. "Veronica, we've discussed this. They couldn't handle the nightly crying. None of them understood what was really going on with the triplets." Yes, the famous infant grief," Veronica replied, a touch of skepticism in her voice. She cast a glance at Caroline before continuing. "But what I found curious was the mention of a cleaner who was always around during the crying crises." Caroline froze, the blanket still in her hands. The former agency employee, Martha, if I'm not mistaken, commented that the second-to-last nanny had mentioned a cleaner who seemed eerily interested in the babies. Apparently she was always coincidentally cleaning near the triplets' room during the crying episodes. Raphael sighed, putting the hat aside. "Veronica, what are you getting at?" "I'm just sharing interesting information," Veronica replied with feigned innocence. "Don't you find it curious that Caroline was always around during the crises? Almost as if waiting for the right moment to present herself as a savior." The heavy silence that followed was broken only by the sound of Michael clapping his hands on one of the new toys. "Mrs. Albright," Caroline finally spoke, her voice calm but firm. "If you're insinuating that I somehow planned all this, I must say you're mistaken. I was cleaning that corridor during my normal working hours. If it seemed like I was always around during the crying, it's because the babies cried for 6 hours every night, and my shift coincided with that period." Of course, Veronica agreed superficially. "I just found it curious, especially considering how quickly you managed to replace highly qualified nannies and gain my son-in-law's trust." Raphael placed Marina on the floor and stood up, clearly irritated. Enough, Veronica. Caroline has been a blessing to this family. Thanks to her, your grandchildren are finally happy and healthy. Instead of making unfounded insinuations, you should be grateful. Veronica maintained her composure, though her eyes betrayed an unwavering determination. I'm just looking out for my grandchildren's well-being, Raphael. It's my duty as a grandmother and as a guardian of Beatrice's legacy. And I respect that, Raphael replied, moderating his tone. But I also need you to respect my decisions as a father. Caroline stays. She is exactly what the triplets need right now. Caroline, feeling the rising tension, decided to intervene. It's almost time for their morning snack. I'll prepare the fruit for the babies. Say excuse me. She left the room with firm steps, maintaining her dignity, though her heart pounded. In the corridor, away from Raphael and Veronica's eyes, she allowed herself a moment of vulnerability, leaning against the wall and taking a deep breath. Veronica's insinuations had shaken her more than she would have liked to admit, not because there was any truth to them. Caroline had never planned to replace the Nannies or gain a position in the Mendel family. But because in recent weeks something unexpected had happened, she cared deeply, not just about the triplets, but also about Raphael. The idea that Veronica could convince him that her intentions were questionable caused a pain that surprised her with its intensity. In the kitchen, Caroline began to prepare the baby's snack: small pieces of banana, cooked apple, and tiny cubes of white cheese. Her movements were automatic, her mind still processing the confrontation in the music room. Don't let her get to you. Raphael's voice startled her. He stood in the kitchen doorway, hands in his pockets, a look of regret on his face. Veronica left the children playing with the new toys. I thought I'd see if you needed help, he explained, approaching, and I also wanted to apologize for her behavior. Caroline shook her head. You don't need to apologize for someone else's actions. Raphael, Mrs. Albright is just being protective of her family. She's being unfair, and you know it, Raphael insisted, stopping beside her at the kitchen counter. Veronica has always had difficulty trusting people, even before what happened to Beatrice. Now it's worse. It's understandable, Caroline replied, her posture softening slightly. Losing a child is the worst pain there is. It makes you want to control everything around you, desperately, to avoid suffering again. Raphael watched Caroline for a few moments, admiring her capacity for empathy, even towards someone who treated her with suspicion. How do you do it? Be so understanding of someone who is practically trying to sabotage you. Caroline stopped what she was doing and looked directly at Raphael. Because I understand her pain. And when you understand someone's pain, it's hard to be angry, even when the person isn't being fair. Raphael held her gaze, something indefinable passing between them, a mutual understanding that went beyond words. Slowly, without realizing he was doing it, he raised his hand and touched Caroline's face, brushing away a lock of hair that had fallen over her eyes. The touch, soft and brief, sent an electric current through both of them. Caroline felt her heart race, and Raphael seemed equally affected, his eyes revealing a confusion of emotions he wasn't prepared to name. The moment was broken by the sound of approaching footsteps. Raphael quickly withdrew his hand, taking a step back, while Caroline turned her attention back to the fruit. Janet entered the kitchen, stopping briefly as she noticed the charged atmosphere. Sorry to interrupt. Mrs. Albright is asking if she can bathe the triplets before lunch. Of course, Raphael replied, his voice slightly unsteady. Tell her Caroline is already preparing their snack, and the babies will have their bath right after. When Janet left, Raphael and Caroline remained silent for a few seconds, both processing what had almost happened between them. Raphael, Caroline finally spoke, her voice soft but determined. We need to be careful. For you, for the triplets, and for my job here. He nodded, running a hand through his hair in a nervous gesture. You're right. It was a moment of weakness. It won't happen again. Caroline felt a pang of something she refused to recognize as disappointment. It's for the best, she agreed, forcing a professional smile. Now can you help me put these snacks into separate bowls? Marina likes the blue one, Matthew the green, and Michael the yellow. Raphael smiled, grateful for the change of subject to safer ground. Of course. And don't forget, Matthew won't eat bananas if they're too ripe. And Michael prefers his cheese in perfect cubes, not irregular pieces, Caroline completed, laughing. As they worked side by side preparing the triplets' snack, both tried to ignore what had happened, or almost happened, between them. But the seed was planted, and something had definitely changed in the dynamic of their relationship. On the other side of the house, Veronica watched the triplets play with their new presents, her face a mask of determination. Beside her on the sofa was her open handbag, from which a business card could be seen. Blackwood and Associates, Private Investigations. The battle for control of the Mendel family was entering a new, more dangerous phase. And Caroline, busy in the kitchen, had no idea of the storm brewing on the horizon. A storm that threatened to destroy not only her position in that house, but also the fragile happiness that was finally beginning to blossom within those walls. Raphael Mendel's office occupied an entire floor of an imposing building in the financial heart of New York City. Mendel Tech, the company that had revolutionized the digital security sector in the United States, was Raphael's pride, a creation he had built from scratch with vision, determination, and a natural talent for identifying technological trends before the competition. But that Thursday afternoon, the businessman couldn't concentrate on any of his scheduled meetings. His gaze constantly drifted to the clock on the wall, counting the minutes until he could return home. "Raphael, are you listening to me?" Marcus Bell, his financial director, brought him back to reality. Around the conference table, 5 executives awaited his answer, expressions ranging from concern to confusion. "Sorry, Marcus. Can you repeat the question?" Raphael adjusted his posture, trying to regain focus. "I asked if you agree with the expansion strategy to the southeast still this year. The numbers are promising, but the initial investment is considerable." Raphael looked at the presentation projected on the screen. Graphs, financial projections, market analyses, all pointing to a decision that 6 months ago he would have made without hesitation. Now, however, something had changed. His priorities were different. "Let's postpone the expansion until the first quarter of next year," he finally decided. "I want a more detailed risk analysis and a plan that allows me to supervise the process without having to spend weeks away from New York City." Marcus exchanged surprised glances with the other executives. The Raphael they knew would never hesitate at an opportunity for growth, much less put personal considerations ahead of business needs. "Is there a problem, Raphael?" asked Sophia, the marketing director, after a moment of awkward silence. Raphael sighed, looking at the team that had helped build his empire. Competent, dedicated people who deserved honesty. No problem. On the contrary, for the first time in a long time, things at home are good. The triplets are well, finally. I'm managing to be a father and CEO at the same time, and I don't want to destabilize that balance with prolonged trips right now. The executives nodded, some with understanding smiles. Everyone there knew Raphael's story. Beatrice's loss, the problems with the babies, the sleepless nights that had turned him into a shadow of the confident leader he had always been. "We understand perfectly," Sophia replied, "and I agree that we can plan the expansion more calmly. The Southeast isn't going anywhere." The meeting continued for another 30 minutes, discussing adjustments to the expansion plan. When it finally ended, Raphael checked his phone. 3 messages from Caroline with photos of the triplets in the park, radiant smiles on faces that, until a few weeks ago, seemed permanently contorted in tears. "Good news?" Marcus asked, noticing the smile that formed on Raphael's face. "The best kinds of news," Raphael replied, showing him the photos. "Who knew these were the same babies who kept me awake for 10 whole months?" Marcus whistled softly. "Incredible difference." "What changed?" Raphael hesitated, uncertain how much to share. "We found someone who really understands what they need. A professional who worked a miracle, basically. The super nanny everyone's talking about? I heard rumors at the last company happy hour." Raphael laughed. "Super nanny? Is that what they're calling her?" "Among other names," Marcus shrugged. "Mendel's savior, baby whisperer. People were really impressed when you brought the triplets last week to meet the office. First time we've seen them without them crying." Raphael felt a wave of pride, not just for his children, but also for Caroline. She had transformed not only the babies' lives but his too. In recent weeks, he had rediscovered the joy he thought he had lost forever with Beatrice's passing. He felt lighter, more present, more alive. "Her name is Caroline," he finally said. "And yes, she's amazing." Something in the way he pronounced those words made Marcus raise his eyebrows, but he had the good sense not to comment. "Well, I need to go," Raphael announced, gathering his documents. "I promised to be home for the triplets' dinner." Of course, of course." "Go be a dad. We'll take care of things here." Raphael drove through the congested streets of New York City with an anxiety that surprised him. In the past, extending his day at the office seemed the most natural option, a refuge from the emotional chaos that awaited him at home. Now it was the opposite. He yearned for the moment he would cross the mansion doors, hear the joyful squeals of his children, see Caroline's warm smile. Caroline. Her name evoked a confusion of feelings that Raphael was not yet prepared to fully analyze. Since that moment in the kitchen 3 weeks ago, something had changed between them. Nothing had been said, no line had been crossed, but there was a tension in the air, an unrealized potential that both tacitly agreed to ignore. Parking in the circular driveway of the mansion, Raphael took a deep breath, trying to organize his thoughts. Veronica's constant presence made everything even more complicated. His mother-in-law seemed to have developed a sixth sense for interrupting any moment when he and Caroline were alone. Her insinuations had become less direct, but more frequent. Innocent comments about the importance of preserving Beatrice's memory, or casual stories about widowers who remarried too soon and ended up regretting it. Upon entering the house, Raphael was greeted by an unusual silence. Normally, at this hour, he would hear Caroline singing with the triplets, or the sound of some children's music playing in the playroom. "Hello, Caroline," he called, placing his briefcase on the hall table. "Janet?" No answer. A slight discomfort began to form in his chest. Raphael quickly climbed the stairs, heading to the baby's room. Empty. The playroom, too. The kitchen. Nothing. The discomfort turned into apprehension. Taking out his phone, he called Caroline. It rang until it went to voicemail. He tried Janet with the same result. That's when he heard a noise coming from the back of the house, a muffled sound of voices. Following the sound, he reached the pool area, where he found a scene that momentarily paralyzed him. Caroline was sitting on a lounge chair, the triplets in a makeshift playpen beside her. In front of her, Veronica gestured animatedly, her voice rising in volume with each sentence. Janet stood a few feet away, visibly uncomfortable, as if she had been dragged into a confrontation she would rather avoid. "Absolutely unacceptable," Veronica was saying. "Do you think you can just infiltrate this family? Do you think we wouldn't notice your intentions?" Caroline maintained admirable calm, though her face was pale. "Mrs. Albright, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just doing my job here." "Your job?" Veronica laughed humorlessly. "Your job is to care for the triplets, not to bewitch my son-in-law or try to replace my daughter." Raphael stepped forward, unable to continue watching in silence. "Veronica! What's going on here?" 3 heads turned in his direction. The triplets, seeing their father, immediately began making excited noises, oblivious to the tension between the adults. "Oh, Raphael, good thing you're here," Veronica replied, her tone drastically changing to something almost cordial. "We were just having a necessary little chat here." "This doesn't look like a little chat," Raphael observed, approaching the playpen to check on the babies. All seemed well. Marina chewed on a teether, Matthew played with colorful blocks, and Michael observed everything with his curious eyes. "Can someone explain what's happening?" Caroline stood up, clearly uncomfortable. "I'll take the triplets inside. It's getting cool out here." "No, stay," Raphael requested, his voice softer. "I want to understand what's happening." Veronica crossed her arms, her face a mask of determination. "What's happening, Raphael, is that I finally found out who Caroline Summers really is. And you need to know before it's too late." Caroline paled even more, her hands clutching the edge of the lounge chair. "What are you talking about, Veronica?" Raphael asked, trying to keep calm. Veronica opened her bag and took out some folded papers. "I hired an investigator." "Don't look at me like that. It was absolutely necessary. I needed to be sure that the person caring for my grandchildren was who she said she was. You did what? The disbelief in Raphael's voice was palpable. You investigated one of my employees without my knowledge or consent. Thank me later, Veronica replied coldly, unfolding the papers. The touching story your Caroline told about having lost a child. Partially true. She did have a son. Yes, Peter Summers, deceased at 8 months. But what she didn't mention, Veronica paused dramatically, looking directly at Caroline, is that the authorities initially suspected her. What? Raphael turned to Caroline, who now looked about to faint. This is a terrible distortion of the facts, Caroline finally spoke, her voice trembling. There were never any formal charges against me. That was a terrible mistake that was clarified in a matter of days. Explain better, Veronica continued, relentless. The initial medical report raised doubts about the time between the onset of symptoms and seeking care. A nurse even recorded concern about possible neglect. I took him to the clinic 3 times, Caroline exclaimed, tears now streaming freely down her face. 3 times they sent me back home saying it was just a cold. When I finally managed to get them to do the X-ray, it was already too late. Raphael felt his heart clench. There was such raw pain in Caroline's voice, such genuine agony, that it was impossible to doubt her. Veronica, enough. This has gone too far, he interjected. I'm not finished, Veronica insisted, consulting the papers. After the boy's death, Caroline filed lawsuits against the hospital and doctors involved. All were dismissed due to lack of evidence of medical negligence. And then comes the most interesting part. Veronica looked directly at Caroline. After losing all the lawsuits and spending her savings on lawyers, she started working in the same hospital area where her son was treated. Coincidence? I think not. Caroline shook her head, incredulous. I volunteered in the pediatric ward because I wanted to help other children, to turn my pain into something positive. How can you distort something so... And then, Veronica continued, as if Caroline hadn't spoken, she started showing a special interest in babies with complicated family histories, orphans mainly. A heavy silence fell over the group. Michael began to whimper in the playpen, feeling the tension in the air. Caroline immediately turned to him, but Veronica was faster. Don't touch my grandson, she ordered, placing herself between Caroline and the playpen. Raphael, don't you see the pattern here? A woman who lost her child, who sued institutions and lost everything, who then starts approaching vulnerable babies, and then, coincidentally, manages to infiltrate the house of a millionaire widower with triplets who lost their mother. Raphael looked at Caroline, who was now crying silently, her whole body trembling. Michael cried louder, clearly disturbed by not being able to go into Caroline's arms, which always calmed him. Janet, Raphael called, his voice surprisingly firm. Please take the triplets inside, give them dinner, and prepare them for their bath. We'll sort this out here. The housekeeper nodded, clearly relieved to be able to exit the situation. Efficiently, she gathered the 3 babies from the playpen and quickly headed into the house. When they were alone, Raphael faced Veronica. What exactly are you insinuating about Caroline? I'm not insinuating, I'm stating, Veronica replied coldly. This woman sees in my grandchildren a replacement for the son she lost. And in you she sees a path to the financial security she lost with the failed lawsuits. It's a perfect plan when you think about it. Gain your trust through the babies. Make herself indispensable, and then, well, you two seem to be getting closer, aren't you? That's absurd, Raphael replied, but there was a hesitation in his voice that did not go unnoticed by either woman. Is it? Veronica pressed. Then why did she never mention that she was initially investigated for her own son's death? Why did she hide that she worked specifically with orphans afterward? Why did she omit that she lost everything with failed lawsuits? Because they are painful parts of my life that do not define who I am. Caroline finally exploded, years of pent-up pain overflowing in every word. Yes, I was questioned when he left us. Do you know why? Because I was a single mother, young, low income. His father disappeared when he found out about the pregnancy. I worked 2 jobs to support him, and when he got sick, I had to miss work to take him to the doctor. When the doctor sent me back home saying it was just a cold, I believed him. Because he was the doctor, the specialist, and I was just an overly anxious first-time mother. Tears flowed freely now, but there was a strength in Caroline that neither Raphael nor Veronica expected. I was investigated for exactly 3 days, until the autopsy confirmed severe bacterial pneumonia, consistent with late diagnosis and not with parental neglect. I didn't mention it because it's the most humiliating part of the worst time of my life. And yes, I volunteered with orphaned babies afterward. Do you know why? Because I know what the pain of abandonment, of loss, feels like. Because I wanted to give those children what my son didn't have time to receive: love, attention, affection. Caroline turned to Raphael, her eyes pleading for understanding. I never wanted to replace Beatrice. I never planned to infiltrate your family or get close to you for money. I was literally cleaning the floor of that house when I heard the desperation in your children's cries and recognized the same pain I carried. Raphael was motionless, processing everything he heard. Veronica used the moment to press her advantage. Beautiful words, Caroline. Truly touching. But facts are facts. You kept secrets. You omitted crucial parts of your story. How can Raphael trust someone who hides so many things? Raphael looked from Veronica to Caroline, his face an impenetrable mask. I need to think, he finally said. Caroline, I think it's best if you spend the night in the staff quarters today. Janet can take over with the triplets for tonight. It was as if he had delivered a physical blow. Caroline recoiled, the pain of rejection evident in her eyes. You don't believe me, she whispered. I didn't say that, Raphael replied, but his voice was distant, guarded. I just need time to process all this, to think clearly. Caroline nodded slowly, a resigned calm replacing her previous agitation. I understand. I'll get some things from my room and move to the staff quarters until... She didn't finish the sentence, leaving open the possibility that there would be no until. As Caroline walked away towards the house, Veronica couldn't hide a small smile of triumph. You're doing the right thing, Raphael. We need to protect the triplets, protect Beatrice's legacy. Raphael didn't respond. Instead, he watched Caroline's retreating figure, an uncomfortable feeling growing in his chest. Something about all of it felt deeply wrong, but the mention that Caroline had been investigated for her own son's death had planted a seed of doubt he couldn't completely ignore. What if Veronica was right? What if everything, the interest in the triplets, the ability to calm them when no one else could, the closeness she had developed with him, was part of an elaborate plan? But then he remembered Caroline's look when she spoke of Peter, the raw, unmistakable pain, the way she understood each of the triplets' unique needs, how she had brought light into a house that had lived in emotional darkness for 10 months. Could that be faked? Calculated? Raphael ran a hand over his face, feeling the weight of a decision that seemed impossible. On one side, the safety of his children, the most precious thing he possessed. On the other, the woman who had brought peace and happiness back into his life, but who had kept important secrets. I'll supervise the triplets' dinner and bath today, Veronica announced, briefly touching Raphael's arm. Take your time to think, but remember, Beatrice entrusted those children to you. The final responsibility is yours. With those words, Veronica also headed into the house, leaving Raphael alone with his conflicting thoughts. The sun began to set, casting long shadows over the immaculate garden. Somewhere inside the mansion, his children were being prepared for a night routine that Caroline had established with such care. And also, somewhere in that house, the woman who had brought order to chaos was now packing her few belongings, preparing for a departure that might become permanent. Raphael sat on the lounge chair Caroline had occupied minutes earlier, still warm from her presence. The soft perfume she wore, a simple lavender fragrance, lingered lightly in the air. He closed his eyes, trying to organize his thoughts, but could only see her face, first smiling as she calmed Michael, then contorted in pain as she defended herself against Veronica's accusations. Two faces of the same woman. Which one represented the true Caroline Summers? The loving caregiver who had saved his children, or the calculating opportunist Veronica described? The answer seemed impossible to reach at that moment. But one thing Raphael knew for sure: that night would be long. And for the first time in weeks, it wasn't the triplets crying that would keep everyone awake, but the deafening silence of her absence from the routine that had become the heart of the home. Night fell over the Mendel mansion like a heavy shroud. Inside the triplets' room, Veronica tried to implement the nightly routine she had observed Caroline perform in recent weeks. She had prepared the bottles at the exact temperature, laid out the small pajamas, organized the bath products. Everything should work perfectly, but nothing was working. "Come on, Michael, cooperate with Grandma," Veronica pleaded, trying for the third time to put the pajamas on the baby, who squirmed as if the soft fabric were made of thorns. Across the room, Marina cried inconsolably in her crib, refusing to accept the bottle Janet tried to offer. Matthew, in turn, had hidden under the changing table, and no attempt to get him out had worked. "Maybe we should call Caroline," Janet suggested hesitantly, after Marina spit out the bottle for the fourth time, sobbing between high-pitched screams. "Absolutely not," Veronica replied, her normally composed face now red with frustration. "I raised Beatrice alone. I can raise my grandchildren too." Janet didn't respond, but her look said it all. After weeks of tranquility, the mansion had returned to chaos in a matter of hours. It was as if the triplets knew something was wrong, that someone important was missing. Marina's crying intensified, reaching that specific frequency that used to trigger a chain reaction. As predicted, Michael immediately abandoned his struggle against the pajamas and began to cry too. Seconds later, Matthew joined the chorus, emerging from his hiding place only to throw himself on the floor in a fit of tears. "My goodness," Veronica murmured, her confidence visibly shaken. "What's happening to them?" Janet, who had witnessed similar scenes in the months before Caroline's arrival, merely sighed. "It's like it was before, Mrs. Albright, exactly like before." In the hallway, Raphael stopped at the bedroom door, his hand on the doorknob, paralyzed by the sound he knew so well. The concert of desperate cries, the symphony of suffering that had been the soundtrack of his life for 10 long months, and that, miraculously, had ceased in recent weeks. "Raphael, thank goodness," Veronica exclaimed when he finally entered the room. Her perfectly styled hair was now disheveled, her lipstick smudged, her Italian silk blouse stained with what looked like powdered milk. "Something is wrong with the triplets. They just don't cooperate." Raphael observed the chaotic scene, a sense of déjà vu washing over him. For a moment, he felt transported back to those endless nights when no nanny could calm his children, when despair was his only constant companion. "They miss her," he finally said, his voice almost inaudible beneath the cries. "What?" Veronica asked, unsuccessfully adjusting Michael in her arms. "Caroline, they miss her." Raphael approached Marina, gently picking her up from the crib. "It's exactly as she explained. They're grieving again. Don't be ridiculous, Raphael. They're babies. They don't have the cognitive capacity to—" "It's not about cognition, Veronica," Raphael interrupted, positioning Marina against his chest as Caroline had taught him. "It's about emotional connection, security. They feel safe with Caroline, comfortable, understood." The baby continued crying, though with less intensity. Raphael began to apply the gentle rhythmic pressure to Marina's back that he had learned from Caroline. "It's the heart method," he explained to Veronica, who watched him with a mixture of skepticism and reluctant curiosity. "The pressure simulates the heartbeats they heard in the womb. It instinctively calms them." "And since when did you become a baby expert?" Veronica questioned, but there was less acidity in her voice now, replaced by genuine curiosity as she watched Marina gradually calm down in her father's arms. "Since Caroline taught me," Raphael replied simply. "She didn't hoard her knowledge like a secret or a weapon. She shared everything she knew with me, with Janet, even with you when you allowed it." Veronica looked away, uncomfortable with the observation. It was true. Caroline had tried several times to include her in the triplets' routine, explain her techniques, share her insights into each baby's unique personality. "That doesn't change the facts." "Raphael," Veronica insisted, though her voice had lost some of its previous conviction. She withheld important information. She was investigated for what happened to her own son. "For 3 days, Raphael corrected, now gently swaying as Marina finally began to settle. 3 days of investigation that were closed, when the autopsy proved she was not at fault at all. Don't you think you're distorting the facts to fit the narrative you created about her?" Michael continued crying in Veronica's arms, who tried unsuccessfully to imitate Raphael's movements. "Here, let me try," Raphael offered, approaching for a complex transfer, taking Michael while passing Marina to Veronica. "And what do I do?" asked Veronica. clearly uncomfortable with little Marina, who threatened to start crying again at any moment. "Imitate exactly what I'm doing," Raphael instructed, demonstrating the back pressure technique again. "It's like a heartbeat, constant, rhythmic." As Veronica tried to follow the instructions, Raphael applied the same technique to Michael, who began to respond positively. Matthew, however, remained inconsolable under the table. "Janet, can you bring some classical music?" "The Mozart that Caroline always plays for Matthew. It's on the stereo over there." The housekeeper nodded, relieved to have a concrete task. In seconds, the first soft notes of Mozart's Eine kleine Nachtmusik filled the room. The effect on Matthew was almost immediate. His crying subsided as he listened, his small head slowly emerging from under the table. "It's incredible," Veronica murmured, watching the triplets gradually calm down. "She really knows each of them." "Yes, she does," Raphael confirmed, sitting in the armchair with Michael now calmer in his arms. "Because she genuinely cares. Because she sees each one as a unique individual, not just as the triplets or Beatrice's children." The last sentence hit Veronica like a direct arrow. That was exactly how she thought of the babies, as extensions of her lost daughter, little pieces of Beatrice that needed to be protected and preserved in a bubble. "I just want to protect them," Veronica admitted, her voice softening. "Protect what's left of Beatrice in this world." "I know," Raphael replied gently, "and I understand that, more than you imagine. But the triplets are not just memories of Beatrice. They are independent people, with their own needs." Matthew, attracted by the music, had finally emerged from his hiding place and now cautiously approached Raphael. His small arms outstretched in a silent plea to be picked up too. "Come here, champ," Raphael called, leaning down to pick up the third baby with his free arm, balancing him alongside Michael. "I bet you miss Caroline, don't you?" Upon hearing the name, the three babies reacted visibly, Marina stopping her wiggling in Veronica's arms as if paying attention, Michael letting out a small sigh, and Matthew babbling something that sounded suspiciously like "Ka." "They recognize her name," Veronica observed, genuine surprise in her voice. "Of course they do. She's been the most constant person in their lives lately," Raphael explained. "The person who finally understood what they were feeling and found a way to help them." A thoughtful silence fell over the room, broken only by the soft notes of Mozart and the occasional sounds the babies made, now softer, less desperate. "Even if everything you say about her is true," Veronica finally spoke, choosing her words carefully, "even if she truly has the baby's best interests at heart, you can't ignore the fact that something is growing between you two." Raphael did not respond immediately. There was no denying what Veronica suggested. There was a connection between him and Caroline, something that went beyond the professional relationship between employer and employee. Something he wasn't ready to name but could no longer ignore. "What if there is?" he finally asked, his voice low but firm. "If there is something between us, would that be so terrible?" The question hung in the air, heavy as lead. Veronica adjusted Marina in her arms, observing her granddaughter's face, who had finally fallen asleep. "Beatrice is not—" Veronica began, but her voice faltered. "Beatrice is no longer here," she finally managed to say, the words carrying the weight of an acceptance she still struggled to fully reach. "And you are young, Raphael. The triplets need a mother figure." "But," Raphael pressed gently, noticing the hesitation in his mother-in-law's words. Veronica sighed. "But it all happened so fast. How long have you known each other? A month? And she comes from a world so different from ours. No formal education, no family connections, no—" She stopped, realizing how it sounded. "No money? No social status," Raphael completed, a note of defiance in his voice. "It's not just that," Veronica insisted, though her tone suggested that was exactly what it was. "It's a matter of compatibility, of shared values, of raising the children in a stable and familiar environment." Raphael shook his head, a small sad smile on his lips. "Do you know one of the moments I fell in love with Beatrice? It was when she defended that waitress at the restaurant, remember? The one who spilled soup on the arrogant customer at the next table. Everyone was criticizing the young woman, but Beatrice defended her, said no one deserved to be treated with contempt just for making a human mistake." Veronica was quiet, the memory clearly vivid in her mind. Beatrice always saw the value in people beyond appearances, beyond social status, Raphael continued. It was one of the things I admired most about her, and curiously, Caroline has that same quality, that same ability to see people for who they truly are. The babies were now almost asleep, the method taught by Caroline finally taking effect, even when applied by less experienced hands. I'm not saying I'm in love with Caroline, Raphael clarified, seeing the growing alarm on Veronica's face. I'm saying there's a connection between us that deserves to be explored, not destroyed based on unfounded suspicions and class prejudices. And what do you intend to do now? Veronica asked, her voice softer than usual. Raphael looked at his children, now asleep after the emotional storm. First, put these little ones to bed. Then talk to Caroline, hear her side completely without interference, and then, depending on that conversation, perhaps invite her to return to her work. Veronica opened her mouth to protest, but surprisingly she held back. Can I at least be present for that conversation? No, Veronica, Raphael replied firmly. This is a matter between employer and employee, or perhaps between two adults trying to understand what's happening between them. Either way, it's something we need to resolve in private. Veronica didn't seem happy, but nodded reluctantly. Just promise you'll consider everything carefully. Not just the immediate well-being of the babies, but their future too. That's exactly what I'm doing, Raphael assured, carefully getting up with the two sleeping boys. Let's put them in their cribs and then I'll talk to her. Together, in a silence laden with unexpressed emotions, Raphael and Veronica placed the triplets in their respective cribs. It was the first time since Caroline's arrival that the night routine demanded so much effort, and yet, thanks to the techniques she had taught, the babies finally rested peacefully. As they were about to leave the room, Raphael's cell phone vibrated. He carefully took it from his pocket, trying not to make a sound. A message from Janet. Mr. Raphael, I'm sorry to inform you, but Miss Caroline is not in the staff quarters. It seems she left the property with her belongings. Raphael felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath his feet. What is it? Asked Veronica, noticing his sudden pallor. Caroline is gone, he replied, his voice a shocked whisper. She left the mansion. Well, that certainly proves something, don't you think? Veronica commented, unable to completely hide a tone of satisfaction. If she were innocent, she would have stayed to defend herself. Raphael didn't respond. Instead, he quickly left the room, heading to Caroline's former quarters. The door was ajar, revealing a space devoid of personal presence. The bed was perfectly made, the drawers closed, the closet empty. On the nightstand, however, there was something that caught his attention. A white envelope with his name written in the delicate handwriting he immediately recognized. With slightly trembling hands, Raphael opened the envelope and unfolded the letter it contained. Raphael, when you read this, I will have already left. Not because I am guilty of your mother-in-law's accusations, but because I understand that trust, once broken, is difficult to rebuild. And without trust, I cannot do my job properly. I apologize for not having shared all the details of my past. Perhaps I should have mentioned the brief investigation after Peter's passing, or the failed lawsuits against the hospital. But those are wounds that still hurt too much to be casually exposed. I want you to know that everything I did for the triplets was with genuine love. Every technique I taught, every hour I spent observing their unique personalities, every moment dedicated to understanding their needs, everything was real. They helped me heal parts of myself that I thought would be broken forever, and I hope I did the same for them. As for what was starting to grow between us, those unplanned moments, those silent connections, they were also real. But I understand that you have greater responsibilities than your own feelings. You have 3 wonderful children who depend entirely on you, a company to run, and an extended family to consider. I am leaving detailed instructions about the triplets' routine on the 2nd page of this letter. Please continue to apply the heart method, especially with Michael, who tends to withdraw when he feels insecure. Remember that Marina needs constant verbal stimulation. Talk to her, sing, recite poems, and never forget that Matthew needs physical contact more than the others. Hugs, cuddles, gentle rocking. I wish you all the happiness in the world. You deserve it. With affection, Caroline. Raphael reread the letter several times, each word increasing the feeling that he had made a terrible mistake. The second page, as promised, contained meticulous instructions about the triplets' routine, schedules, preferences, specific techniques for each one. The care and attention to detail reflected a genuine love that no opportunist could fake. She really left? Raphael turned to find Veronica standing in the doorway, her face an indecipherable mask. Yes? He handed the letter to his mother-in-law. Read it. Maybe it will help you understand who she really is. Veronica reluctantly took the letter and began to read. Her face, usually so controlled, revealed conflicting emotions as she absorbed Caroline's words. Raphael, this doesn't necessarily prove she's innocent, Veronica commented after finishing reading, though her tone had lost much of its previous certainty. Manipulators are experts at seeming sincere. Stop, Veronica, Raphael replied, tired. Just stop. Look at this letter. Look at these detailed instructions about the triplets. Would someone with malicious intentions care so much about ensuring each baby continued to receive exactly what they need, even after her departure? Veronica didn't respond, her eyes fixed on the second page of instructions. There was something undeniably touching in the way Caroline described each of the triplets, not as a uniform set, but as three distinct individuals, each with specific needs that she had meticulously observed. I need to find her, Raphael declared, picking up his phone. Before it's too late. What about the triplets? Veronica asked, a last attempt to make him reconsider. They're sleeping now thanks to the techniques Caroline taught us, Raphael replied, already dialing a number. You and Janet can take care of them for a few hours. I have to fix this. On the other end of the line, someone answered. Marcus, it's me. I need your help. Remember that security team we hired to track the information leak last year? I need them now. It's urgent. Veronica watched as Raphael gave quick instructions on the phone, a plan already forming in his determined mind. There was an intensity in him that she rarely saw, the same intensity she had noticed when he met Beatrice years ago and declared to his friends that he had found the woman he would marry. I'll search every shelter and hostel in the city if necessary, Raphael announced after hanging up. Caroline doesn't have many resources. She's probably somewhere accessible by public transport. Veronica hesitated, clearly torn between her instinctive distrust of Caroline and the growing evidence that perhaps, just perhaps, she had judged the young woman unfairly. Raphael, she finally called out when he was already at the door. I have the full investigator's report. It includes her last known address before she came to work here. It might be a place to start. Raphael stopped, surprised by the offer of help. You'd give me that? Veronica sighed, an expression of reluctant surrender on her face. I'm not entirely convinced she's the right person for this family, but she looked again at the letter in her hands. Maybe I'm wrong. And if I am, I don't want to be responsible for pushing away someone who genuinely cares about my grandchildren. She took a folder from her bag and handed it to Raphael. The address is on the first page. But Raphael, she hesitated. Be cautious, please. Raphael nodded, taking the folder. I always am. But this time I think the biggest mistake would be not to act. As Raphael hurried out, Veronica remained in the empty room Caroline had briefly occupied. Her eyes scanned the space devoid of personality, no photos, no personal objects, as if the young woman had passed through there like a ghost. In the silence of the room, Veronica felt a pang of something she rarely experienced, regret. And a disturbing question began to form in her mind. What if, in her determination to protect Beatrice's legacy, she had inadvertently destroyed the possibility of future happiness for the family her daughter had loved? Outside, the New York City night swallowed Raphael's car as he drove with determination. Caroline's address etched in his mind, and the fragile hope that it wasn't too late to mend what had been broken. The night was already well advanced when Raphael finally found the address. It was a small housing complex in Queens, New York City. Far from the luxury of the Upper East Side, the three-story building, without an elevator, had a facade worn by time, but maintained a simple dignity. It was modest but well-maintained, with potted plants decorating some windows. Consulting the investigator's report once more, Raphael confirmed the apartment 302, third floor to the right. His heart pounded as he climbed the concrete steps, his right hand firmly holding the small package he had picked up at home before leaving. In the narrow corridor of the third floor, he stopped before the door marked with faded metal numbers. For a moment he hesitated. What if she refused to see him? What if she was so hurt she wouldn't even open the door? Worse still, what if she wasn't there? Taking a deep breath, he knocked 3 times. Silence. He knocked again, harder this time. Finally, he heard movement inside the apartment. Soft footsteps approaching the door. "Who is it?" Caroline's voice sounded muffled through the wood but unmistakable. "It's me, Raphael." A long pause. So long that Raphael began to fear she would simply go away without opening. "What are you doing here?" Her voice now sounded closer, as if she was leaning against the door. "I came to apologize," Raphael replied, the sincerity evident in his voice, "and to ask you to come back." More silence. Then the sound of locks being unlatched. The door slowly moved, revealing Caroline. She wore simple clothes, sweatpants and a white t-shirt. Her eyes were red and swollen, evidence that she had been crying. "How did you find me?" she asked without fully opening the door. "Veronica's investigator," Raphael admitted. "Ironic, I know. The same person who tried to drive you away ended up helping me find you." Caroline didn't respond immediately, her eyes studying Raphael as if trying to decipher his true intentions. "May I come in?" he asked gently. "Please?" After a moment of hesitation, she opened the door wider, stepping aside. Of course. The apartment was small but cozy. A living room that merged with the open-plan kitchen, a short hallway that likely led to the bedroom and bathroom. The decor was minimal but welcoming. A few framed photographs, a small bookshelf with books, a simple sofa with a colorful throw blanket. "It's a nice place," Raphael commented. "Genuinely." "Thank you," Caroline replied, crossing her arms in an unconscious defensive gesture. "It's not a mansion on the Upper East Side, but it's my home." "Caroline," Raphael began, but she interrupted him. "Before you say anything, I need you to understand one thing," she spoke, her voice firm despite the underlying emotion. "I understand why you doubted me. I really do. In your place, I would have been cautious too. But what hurt me was seeing how, after everything we went through with the triplets, after all the trust we built, one accusation was enough for everything to crumble." Raphael nodded, accepting the criticism. "You're absolutely right. And I have no excuses, only explanations. When Veronica mentioned that you had been investigated for what happened to Peter, something inside me panicked." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Caroline already knew well. "Ever since I lost Beatrice, I've lived in fear. Fear of losing someone else I love, fear of failing as a father, fear of making wrong decisions that would hurt my children." "I understand that fear," Caroline replied, her posture softening slightly. "I've lived with it since Peter left. The fear that somehow it had been my fault, that I could have done something differently." "Is that why you didn't tell me about the investigation?" Raphael asked softly. Caroline sat on the sofa, gesturing for Raphael to do the same. "Partially. But also because it's humiliating, Raphael. To have people suggest, even for a few days, that you might have been negligent with your own child, it's a pain I wouldn't wish on my worst enemy." Raphael sat down, maintaining a respectful distance. "I read your letter. Several times, actually. And I realized I made a terrible mistake," he admitted. "The triplets missed you immediately. They started crying again like before. We had to use the techniques you taught us to calm them down, and even then it was a battle." A small, sad smile passed over Caroline's lips. "They are special children." "They are," Raphael agreed. "And you are special to them." He paused, gathering courage. "And to me too." Caroline's gaze met his, surprise and hope battling in her eyes. "I brought something for you," Raphael continued, handing her the small package he carried. Caroline accepted it hesitantly, carefully unwrapping the paper. It was a silver frame, and inside, a photograph of Caroline with the 3 triplets. In the image, she was sitting on the music room rug, Marina in her lap, Matthew and Michael on either side, all smiling. It was a scene of pure happiness, captured without her realizing it. "When," she began, her voice choked with emotion. "Janet took that photo 2 weeks ago. She showed it to me later, said she'd never seen the baby so happy." Raphael leaned a little closer. "Caroline, you brought light into a house that was in the shadows. Not just for the triplets, but for me too. Silent tears began to stream down Caroline's face as she looked at the photograph. I miss them so much, she confessed. In just a few weeks, they filled a void I thought would never be filled again. Then come back, Raphael asked simply. Come back for them. For us. Caroline wiped her tears with the back of her hand. And Veronica? She'll never accept my presence in that house. About that, Raphael smiled slightly. Believe it or not, she was the one who gave me your address. I think your letter affected her more than she'd like to admit. Caroline seemed genuinely surprised. Really? Veronica is complicated, Raphael explained. Stubborn, controlling sometimes, but deep down she loves the triplets. And when she saw how much they missed you, how utterly inconsolable they were without you, well, let's just say even the hardest heart would be touched. A comfortable silence fell between them, filled only by the distant sound of New York City traffic and the gentle ticking of a clock on the wall. And what about us? Caroline finally asked, verbalizing the question that hung in the air. Raphael gently took her hand. That depends on you, on what you want. I'm scared, she admitted. Scared of getting too close, of caring too much, and then losing everything again. I've already been through that once with Peter. I don't know if I'd survive a second time. I understand that fear better than anyone, Raphael replied. It's the same fear I felt when I realized what I was starting to feel for you. It's terrifying to open your heart after having experienced such a profound loss. Then why risk it? Caroline asked, her voice almost a whisper. Because the alternative is to live half-heartedly, Raphael answered, gently squeezing her hand. Beatrice taught me that. Even knowing the risks of pregnancy, she chose to live fully, to love completely. And despite the pain of loss, I can't say she was wrong. Caroline looked again at the photograph, her fingers tracing the smiling faces of the triplets. They deserve a chance to grow up in a house full of love. Yes, they do, Raphael agreed. And you and I, we also deserve a chance to discover what we can be together. Without rushing, respecting our grieving times, but open to the possibility. Caroline finally smiled, a genuine smile that lit up her entire face. I think I can handle possibilities. So you're coming back? Raphael asked, hope clear in his voice. I'm coming back, Caroline replied, squeezing his hand. For the triplets. Only for them? Raphael teased gently. Caroline laughed, the musical sound filling the small apartment. Perhaps not only for them. 2 years later, the garden of the Mendel mansion was decorated with colorful balloons, tables covered with white tablecloths, and a huge banner announcing, Happy 3rd birthday, triplets. Children ran across the perfectly manicured lawn, their laughter mixing with the joyful music playing. In the center of it all, Marina, Matthew, and Michael, now 3 years old, ran back and forth, their little legs already firm, their faces radiant with joy. Marina, with her dark hair tied in pigtails, organized a small group of friends in an elaborate game she had invented herself. Matthew, always the most physical, led an impromptu race around the pool, carefully isolated for the children's safety. Michael, the observer, was sitting with a small illustrated book, patiently explaining the pictures to 2 fascinated children. They are so different, observed Veronica, now 60, her hair still perfectly dyed, but her face significantly softer. 3 completely distinct personalities. Always have been, replied Caroline, standing beside her, one hand resting on her slightly rounded 5-month pregnant belly. They just needed space to show who they really are. Veronica nodded, a genuine smile on her lips. In the last 2 years, a remarkable transformation had occurred. The initial reluctance to accept Caroline had given way to cautious respect, which eventually blossomed into an unexpected friendship. It helped, of course, that the triplets absolutely adored their grandmother, running into her arms whenever she arrived from Miami for her monthly visits. The photographer has arrived, Raphael announced, approaching the 2 women. Time for the official birthday photo. I'll round up the little beasts, Caroline laughed, heading towards where the children were playing. Raphael watched her walk away, a silly smile on his face that did not escape Veronica's attention. You still look at her as if it were the first time, his mother-in-law commented, a touch of amusement in her voice. Some things never change, Raphael replied, without denying the observation. The wedding had taken place 6 months after that night in Caroline's apartment. A simple ceremony in the mansion's own garden, with the triplets as impromptu ring-bearers, carrying the rings with Janet's help. Veronica, to everyone's surprise including her own, had not only attended but helped with the preparations, insisting that Beatrice would have wanted Raphael to find happiness again. Caroline's current pregnancy had been met with joy by the entire family. The triplets, especially, were fascinated by the idea of a new little brother or sister. Michael often pressed his ear to Caroline's belly, determined to be the first to hear the baby speak. Marina had already decided she would teach the baby everything she knew about the world, an impressive list for someone just 3 years old. Matthew, in turn, practiced being a protective older brother, as he called it, carrying a plush dinosaur that would be his gift for the baby. "Come on, everyone, for the photo," Caroline called, now holding Marina, Matthew clinging to her leg, and Michael holding her hand. Raphael and Veronica joined them under the large garden tree, where the photographer had set up his equipment. With skill born of practice, Raphael picked up Matthew while Veronica picked up Michael. Caroline adjusted Marina in her arms and everyone posed for the photo. "Say family," the photographer asked. "Family!" shouted the triplets in unison, their smiles revealing perfect baby teeth. The flash fired, capturing the moment. A family that had been forged not by blood or convention but by love, mutual understanding, the ability to see beyond pain and envision possibilities for happiness even in the most improbable places. Later that night, with the party over and the triplets finally asleep after the day's excitement, Caroline and Raphael sat on the garden swing, watching the stars that dotted the New York City sky, a rarity, given the city's light pollution. "Thinking about what?" Raphael asked, noticing Caroline's contemplative gaze. "How unpredictable life is," she replied, resting her head on his shoulder. 3 years ago I was cleaning corridors at night, carrying a pain I thought would never heal. And now, he prompted, now I have a family. I have love. I have a new life growing inside me." She placed her hand on her belly. "And the most incredible thing, I no longer feel guilty for being happy again." Raphael kissed the top of her head, perfectly understanding what she meant. "I think that's what Beatrice and Peter would want for us. Not that we should live forever in the pain of loss, but that we should find a way back to joy. Do you think they know?" Somehow, Caroline asked, her voice soft in the quiet night. Raphael thought of the triplets, how they had blossomed under Caroline's care, how they had overcome the primordial pain of being born without knowing a mother's embrace. He thought of how he himself had learned to breathe again, to feel again, to love again. "I think they know," he finally replied. "And I think they're smiling at us now." Caroline smiled, her eyes reflecting the stars above. "I think so too." Sitting there under the starry sky, with 4 hearts asleep inside the house, and a 5th beating gently beneath Caroline's hand, they were living proof that even from the ashes of the deepest pain, new lives, new loves, and new families can flourish, different from the previous ones but equally precious, equally real, equally worthy of being celebrated. End of story.